This is a college class. Now, let me teach you something about being a pastor. Does everybody understand where babies come from? And it's not artificial insemination. It means that people have sexual relationship, which includes desire and lust and the whole kind of element of those elements. Maybe lust, someone could argue about that particular word, that's okay. But there is a passion and a desire that puts people together. And babies are not born through artificial insemination directed by the Holy Spirit. But families are built by the same human drive that drives the sinner as well as the saint. Can I get a witness here? I guess nobody knows anything about this. So you have people, this is what the Apostle Paul, did he not deal with his pastors? Did he not deal with, he said, don't tell people. Matter of fact, he got so far into the subject, he said, let me tell you, you should not even use this whole issue of the human elements of marriage and desire and all. Never use that against one another. Don't ever use that. Don't say, well, and if you do separate sexually for a period of time, do it as unto the Lord. But don't ever use it as a weapon against one another. And we've had people at different times, even in the Pentecostal movement, who say, oh, it got so spiritual that they began to separate men from their wives and vice versa. And the Quakers got into this so bad. Anybody familiar with the Quakers, you might find that kind of interesting, where they forced people to live together. And you know why they played out? Why you can go down into Shakertown in Kentucky, and they'll tell you why they separated the men from the women and didn't believe in any kind of sexual activity, and they all died. Just thought I'd throw that in. Thought you might find it interesting. God does not intend for you to live some kind of life that is apart from life itself. You don't move into this kind of stage, this kind of theatrical stage. Some people want to do that, and most of the time when you dig into people who are trying to put on this scam, this kind of pretense, and you really get into their lives, you find out, well, wow, ain't nobody here. Okay, that was a little too candid. Are you okay? I'm not feeling so well. So, that's a dangerous time for me to teach. So let's go now to discovering your authentic self. All right, any questions before we go on what I've said so far? We've got about another 30 minutes or so, so any questions? And then I'll go into this. Anybody need something to drink? I'm sorry, but you cannot drink in here. All right, let's do this then. Are you okay? Got time? All right, let's go. Now, the authors here really give us some good stuff. Now, let's go to the bottom of page number 34, I think 32. So, to be yourself, you must what? Know yourself. And show yourself enough. We're back to the title of the chapter here. Put it another way, you must be sufficiently self-aware and also prepared to self-declare. That's a nice line if you need it. Self-prepare and be prepared to self-declare. Just as self-knowledge is never complete, and that's, by the way, you should underline that line. It is true that self-knowledge is never complete. I learn something new about myself every day. Some good and some bad. And sometimes I would measure myself as on a certain situation saying, well, you handled that pretty well. Or I would measure myself after a certain situation maybe has developed, and I would give myself a bad grade because I didn't handle it very well. And then there's just those things that surprise you. Has anybody ever gotten mad in a traffic situation? I got so mad the other day, it surprised me. I mean, it surprised me. I didn't realize I had this in me. I didn't think I was having a bad day anyway. But I paused at the stoplight, and a guy blew his horn right behind me. And I was trying to take off, and there was no place he could go because we were like 6 cars back. So it only took like a nanosecond to catch up with the car in front of you anyway. But this guy didn't just blow at me. He started shaking his fist at me, and he gave me the middle finger. Well, I did not know I had it in me. And I got very angry. And Sister Mooney said, what is wrong with you? I said, oh, I'm just kidding. She said, no, you're not kidding. Because I shook my fist, and I went, come on. Like, what was I thinking? This guy could have blown my brains out. If I'd had a It reminded me of the time, I mean, I didn't know I had that level of anger. It just hit me the wrong way. You ever been there?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, you can have the class. A bunch of self-righteous dingbats. Now, there's one little student back there raised his hands. It's just terrible. None of the pastors in here raised their hands. I was in the Christmas, it was in Grand Rapids many years ago, I'll never forget it. I haven't told the story in years, it just comes to my mind. But we were in line getting ready to check out, it's Christmas time, and you know how it goes. I think it was at Kmart, and this man bought a pair of gloves and didn't have a price tag on it. Isn't that frustrating? And the line was long, he'd wait in line to get up there. Christmas time, I think it was even like Christmas Eve, someplace like that. So anyway, she has to call for a price check, and he gets so angry. He starts bawling this woman out, he starts cussing her. She had to call, she was trying to get a hold of the manager, and finally the price came, they checked him out, and we all were just standing back, people shaking their heads, a whole line of people. And he gets the gloves, pays for them. She was ever so nice, ever so professional. And then he gets to the door, he's getting ready to go out, and he turns, and he starts shaking his fist, this blanky white store, and you made me back. And he started cussing, it was so bad. And all of a sudden, I just couldn't handle it anymore. I dropped my bag, my wife went into horror, and I walked over, I said, "Shut up! I'm going to mash your brain like a pimple. Get ready, I'm getting ready to knock your head off. You understand me?" I did not know. I felt pretty good there just for a moment. Especially when this man looked at me, his eyes got real big, and he walked off. He walked out of the store, and I turned, and all of a sudden people were going, "Hey!" And I thought, this is good. This is what a lifestyle. And my wife was holding onto the counter. I mean, literally, she was about, in my whole life, I've never done anything like that. Never. I did not cuss him, but I was close. I was angry. I didn't know I was capable of that kind of anger. And it was a moment of self-awareness. Maybe you've had something similar to that. Right. That, wow, you know, I don't have my life under the blood like I thought I did. Of course, now looking back, I kind of wished I had when I had knocked his head off, you know. Maybe that would have been a good moment too. But, wow. So self-awareness. Now, there's two ways here that the authors point out of self-awareness. And one, of course, well, you can just wait maybe for things like this to happen and you kind of become aware. As far as I know, if I have ever stolen anything other than this one time, it had to be accidental. I have never stolen anything. This sounds terrible. But when I was a little boy, I was trying to pay for some caps for my cap card. And they wouldn't wait on me. Maybe it was because I was a child, they didn't see me. The caps were 5 cents. And so I walked out, and I did not pay for the caps. And I got home that night. Of course, I couldn't open the caps. I felt so bad. And there was a little store in Stringtown, Indiana. This little building is still standing. I thought about this the other day. It's probably what's coming in my mind. And because I was out that way. And I couldn't use the caps. I couldn't shoot the caps. And I prayed, and I saw God. It's hard. I was just a little kid. So without telling my folks, I didn't confess it to anybody. But the next day, I knew I had to do something. So the next day or two, I can't remember, but I went back to that store. I tried to stand there again. The guy wouldn't notice me again. So I took my little nickel and I slid it up there and I put it right there. Started to walk away. And the guy said, "Oh, what's that for?" "Oh, I wished I had gotten out there without that question." Then I had to tell him, "Well, I took some caps yesterday and I'm really sorry. Really sorry." And he said, "Wow, that's okay, kid. You did the right thing." See, you don't know what's in you. And so the first thing that the man says here in the book, and he's right, is what we might call self-discovery, self-knowledge, through self-testing. Through self-testing. So you can read this if you haven't read the second chapter. And you'll see this is very important. And he also suggests that maybe you can get certain courses and you can go to certain people and there's all kinds of psychological tests that you can take. And this is true. Now I want to say something here, and get this. this is kind of the major point on this. Be very, very careful. This is one man's opinion, but I think I'm right about this. Be very, very careful about bringing into your church all these psychological tests to check, these kind of probing questions. I really do have a theory on this, that it can be very dangerous. I see people doing this in seminars now. They probably picked it up in some of their courses and classes and all that. That's okay. But I think that the Holy Ghost is a better examiner of the heart. And the Bible says, let every man examine himself. So there's ways that God will help you, I believe in the Holy Ghost, to discover yourself. But these kind of tests that people are taking today, I think are very dangerous. Plus, I don't know that it's a good idea for other people to be walking around with their briefcases filled with psychological exams that they've administered in other people's lives. Maybe that's not a good thing. But I do believe that there's something to be said, however, that said, there's something to be said for this kind of self-testing. So self-assessment, you see, as he talks about all of this. But there is a better way. And this is the more careful way, and the more, I think, godly way. And this is one of the things I really, when the first time I ever read this book, was the thing that attracted me to the sincerity of the authors, is when I got to this other part here. Verse 33, paragraph, these primarily psychological approaches to personal identity. You see that? You found that? These primarily psychological approaches to personal identity have their limits. You see that? How many's got that in the book? All right, underline this. If we are trying to understand leadership, leadership is a what? It's a relationship. And I'm going to say to you again, students, you really need to have this book. Instead of buying a $4, how much can you buy this book? This book is still high, isn't it? No? Have you got it? Have you found it cheap?
Yeah, $10.
How much is this on the internet?
About $10 for sure.
$5 or $10. So this is 2 cups of Starbucks. This book is much more important than a cup of Starbucks or a hamburger. So fast one day, buy this book. We are trying to understand leadership. Leadership is a relationship. Inevitably, you show what you know. You show what you know about yourself. I dare you to read the next line. In context, what? To others. If you got that line out of this book, and you paid $25.95 for this book, you have spent money well. By the way, let me just pause here to give you a little advice on the book. If you are a professional speaker, a teacher, a pastor, trainer of people, whatever, Sunday school teacher, wherever you're at, education, even anywhere you're dealing with students and people and training, one idea, one thought can alter your thinking and your life to such a degree that you'll never be the same. And so you don't need to get a lot of stuff out of a textbook or even the Bible. You don't have to get it all. If you can just get the basic idea to take forward in your life, it's worth your time to be scratching around in the bookstores and building your library. Take time to do that. If you're not a reader, you'll probably never be a leader. You have to fill yourself up. And this is a great thought right here. How do I best test myself? Well, the psychological test, all of the stuff that we can download, all of these nice little blanks that we can fill in, and you tend to lie on those. I always try to find out if I'm taking a test, do you do this? You try to find out, you think of the answer that might make you look better. Do you think of that? And so I usually lie on those psychological tests. The problem is, they know that, so they build the psychological test to trap you in a lie. So they ask the same question. Have you ever noticed that? The same question 3 or 4 different ways, because they're trying to catch you to see. They're trying to discover your authentic self. It's not easy. It's not easy. But I'll tell you the way to really test it is about your relationships. If a man says that he loves God and he does not keep his commandments, he is a liar. You say you love Jesus and you do not love your brother. Right? So, Christ was basically telling us, friend. Now that's not a psychological test, is it? That is a transactional relationship. That is a moment. That is a total kind of thing that absorbs every part of you. And it is in context. It's your life in context of another life to the ultimate degree. And I tried to make this point at the General Conference when I was given the privilege of speaking this year. And for Christ, when they forced that vinegar into his mouth, and with his last bit of human strength, he had to reject the comfort of the evil aspect of humanity. And so that is what the lesson is. So you have to discover yourself then. Does everybody get that? In context with relationships. So if you are jealous of people, you got a problem. Now, the rest of this is just kind of hinged on that one point. So you can go, I hope you will read all these wonderful examples and how that this kind of works out different for other people, which of course is very, very true. And so to get through this chapter, let's come now to, where can we go here for kind of the final point tonight? I can't read this for you, so if you haven't read it, you will find this difficult. Let's go to page number 46, and I won't bear down too much on this, but here's an example I think he uses of the CEO of Nestle, which at the time was Peter Brabeck, the CEO of Nestle's picture on the cover of Nestle Environmental Report, sitting in the Swiss mountains wearing climbing clothes. In another publication, the Nestle Leadership and Management Principles, he's dressed in a dark suit outside the corporate headquarters. As he told us, I wanted to use the image of the mountaineer because water and environment are emotional issues, but the photo is not artificial. And here's what made this work. That is why I wear, at weekends, I'm a climber. It has to be authentic. You can't try to be something else. In the mountaineering picture, it's a human being talking. In the suit in front of our offices, I'm talking for the institution. Both photographs work well, but they are different. But neither is what? Artificial. Now, you've got to study this and think about this a while, but what he's trying to say is, through the development of your self-knowledge, you become something. When should this start? Today. You should start working on this. Who are you really? What do you really love? What do you really like? Now, I found this difficult as a young person because my particular personality did not fit my high school, and certainly when I made it to Indiana University, I did not fit there. I had to bring myself to this deep place of confidence in who I was as a person, because I was unique, and I grew up different than most people, and I had a struggle. I tried to be like other people, but I couldn't be like. My interests were different. I dressed differently in school. I did not wear a flat top, for an example. I was like, this won't make sense to you, but I was the Fonzie of my generation before there was such a thing as a Fonzie. So that was difficult in a way, and then I didn't have the same interest at school. So I had a different kind of interest. I was interested more on the administrative side of things. So all of that was a struggle for me, but as I found myself, discovered myself, and became my real self, things began to revolutionize my life. I had a teacher by the name of Mr. Reed. I love Mr. Reed. And he really shook me loose from all fears that I had about being who I was. And he said, look, I know you're a Pentecostal. He said, be a Pentecostal. Don't ever be ashamed to be a Pentecostal. And this guy, he was not a Pentecostal, but he helped me to embrace my spiritual life. And that helped me to embrace who I was as a person. and I began to see myself as an individual. And then I began to live within the context of my own passions, my own desires, my own interests. And from that day until this very day, I've never worried a whole lot about trying to be anything else except who I am. And that is just tremendously liberating, because you're not pretending. There's no, see, what would have happened if this CEO had put on this mountaineering garment and had his picture taken up in the mountains? What would have happened to him in his relationship with his staff? What do you think?
Provided it wasn't true.
Provided it wasn't true, he just did it as a photo op. He wouldn't have much credibility. Do you think people would have made fun of him when they saw the picture?
Oh, sure.
Right? So we don't have to hammer that very much. We know that would have been a joke, right? It would be like, it was almost like, of course I hope this came off right, but when I came back from the Azusa Street Riders, with a little leather jacket, that was kind of a joke, right? So I hope everybody got it as a joke. But what if I had really taken that literally, and all of a sudden I started becoming like a pretend biker? I'd been a jerk. Everybody, it had been a joke and a jerk too. And that wouldn't have played out so well. So this man would have lost credibility, and people would have laughed, because they would have said, well, he's just in a costume. That's what people are going to do to you, my brothers and sisters, if you are not the real person that you claim to be. And that is something you have to discover over time. Now let's stop there. How do you discover yourself? You're going to have to think about it, read about it. I know what my struggle was, and you're going to have to find who you really are. And now, I am not the kind of person who believes that you ought to say, God, this is what I am, and you're going to have to. That's not what we're talking about here when you're laying aside obedience to Jesus Christ. I'm talking about the you that's inside of you. That is the real. Any questions about what we talked about tonight? Any thoughts? Any concepts?
Just keep going back to that first chapter where he said to be you more, better. That's just, it's not about not growing, it's about finding yourself your niche and growing in your strength.
There is a point here, too. Thank you for that, Brother Kilman, because if you'll notice, this chapter is know yourself, know and show yourself enough. So there is a certain kind of, you can't overplay your personality, but you can't do away with your personality either. I wish we could spend time in the last part of this chapter, but really, there's just kind of repeating. There is some help in page number 56. And it's about kind of, this is what I was trying to say when I was talking about myself. It's kind of trying to figure out who you are. And what is this list? Has anyone can you go to that page? Notice this list. He's giving you some kind of practical pointers as to kind of accepting who you are. So, I don't think this is psychological. You're missing the point if you think, and this is not greasy, or this is not something about trying to, it really is kind of trying to form your life within the image of the authentic person that you really are. See, I was born and raised in Indiana, that's who I am. I was born on Nameless Creek. In other words, live with that. I like reading the famous Hoosier poet, James Wakem Riley, because that was his struggle, making sure that everybody knew that he was the Hoosier poet. He was not ashamed of his, where he came from, and he used that, he built that into his image, into who he was. And so you see this sometimes with great preachers and you don't know. Let's take somebody who's very visible. Some of you didn't get a chance to hear Brother Mangan, Bishop Mangan. You had a chance to hear him many times. He always was working through. I think of Brother Crack, who always was emphasizing his kind of farm roots. He was trying to, he built most of his preaching around cows and pigs and dogs and all of that, because he wanted people to see him in that, his real self. Does that make sense? And you see, I noticed in this last sermon that Brother Mangan preached at the General Conference. He continued in that tradition. In other words, he was constantly putting himself in his own setting and defining his ministry within the context of the struggle of his own family. And so here are some of the things that he seek out new experiences and new contexts, get honest feedback, explore biography, return to your roots, find a third place. This is a very important little paragraph right there. The American writer Odenberg has put forward the convincing argument that after work and family, all need a third place, somewhere we can make associations, develop a sense of self, freed from the obligations of work and family. Rose, for the fictional characters of the United States comedy Cheers, the bar illustrates such a third place. And I think a lot of preachers do have the third place, and it's a good thing. You know, I like working with the city. I like being on the 10-Point Coalition. I like hanging out at City Hall, going to the meetings, and so forth, because it's kind of a third place. So you get to put yourself in a setting that's completely apart from your normal work. This kind of thing. So you learn a lot in those third settings. There's much to be said about that. All right? It's been fun talking to you tonight. Was it too much lecture tonight? Very sorry. God bless you. Love you. Get out of here. Thank you very much. Sign very